Everything is Awesome is part of Courts and Parts, a podcast network featuring pop culture, TV, movie, and geek podcasts. Check out some of our other shows, like TV Ate My Brain, Let's Chat with Revelin Friends, and Podstalgic at courtsandparts.com.
Awesome. Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. That was awesome.
You guys are awesome.
No, you're awesome.
No, you are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kevin. This is a show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. If you're listening to this, we're finally caught up from the end of summer. End of summer blitz, we'll call it, I guess, where we fell a little behind because of all the vacations we took. But we're back. Things are good. You can find us on awesomepodcast.com, at realawesomepod on facebook.com, and of course Twitter, at awesomepodcast on Instagram. You can also find us on the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network on coretemparts.com. We are speaking with a fellow podcaster this week. He is the host of Tuff Love. Please welcome to the show, Robert Kandell. Robert,
Hi,
how you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Thank you for doing this show. And we it's been a while since we've done a random podcast interview, fellow podcasters. I love talking to other podcasters because it's easy to I think interview one another because we just know what to do. True
enough.
So why don't we kick off with telling us a little bit about your podcast, Tuff Love.
I've been doing the podcast for close to 2 years. I did workshops for about 12 years, and I left the company I built and was doing workshops on my own, and then got really sick of the entire process, not the teaching, but the enrollment. And I said, I still have something I wanted to say, and so I kind of took my focus off running workshops into running the podcast. And it's been a blast ever since. It was really an experiment in the beginning, but has become my platform for teaching.
So where, as far as podcasting goes, where's your origin point to that? Like, what led you to the world of podcasting?
I've always been a fan of podcasts for a long time, but never really thought about doing one until I hit this frustration point with running workshops. And then I was like, it really was an innocent thought of like, well, why don't I just do a podcast? It kind of came out that in my head. And I gave myself 6 shows to start. And that was so much fun. I did another 6, and then I've been doing it ever since. And I think I just published number 87 or 88. So it's been a really great experience.
Yeah, podcasting is one of those things that I think is just totally creatively fulfilling. If you're a creative person, or if you just like to talk, or if you have a message just to put out there, it is even though it costs, I've been doing it for 10 years now. It costs a lot of money. People, it's the least expensive. I think medium to tell your story, but it's also the most expensive hobby you're ever going to have, because it's not cheap if you want to do it at a high quality.
True. Very, very true. I just spent $600 on microphones, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's always the fun part of being a podcaster too, is like kind of looking at what you have and like, well, let's see, I can tweak this and that. Like we just went through and noted like what upgrades we wanted to make, just because it's been a while since we upgraded, and if you it can get pricey. But that being said, it's also when you first started out podcasting, did you jump right in buying all the equipment you needed to buy, or did you kind of start off in an inexpensive route?
A disaster in terms of podcasting quality. I was living in Venice Beach, California. I had wooden floors. I had tall ceilings. I had a dog named Finnegan next door. I had a fire station about 3 blocks away, and so my podcast sound quality was awful. And I don't think I even used a microphone. I think I just used, my laptop in front of me. And so my first 6 to 8 episodes, the sound quality is abysmal. So I just learned, and I started asking questions, and got a microphone as a Christmas present. So it's been a total change and morph as I've gotten more and more knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, it's something that it's you can do it with the bare necessities, and depending on if you go into it with the bare necessities and no knowledge, it's you're gonna have that sound quality that's a little lower. But I would say almost every podcast, even this one, this podcast, this episode is, I believe, 84 or 85, but I've been doing it for much longer than that. But so I would say I was probably about 8 years in when I started this podcast. And even then, like, the first 10 episodes was like a learning experience because it was a new format, doing things a bit differently, new hardware, new software.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that I think is always just kind of a learning experience. You never stop learning new tricks of podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to hear that, because I've never even thought to sit down and just use my laptop to record a podcast,
mm-hmm.
Without the external microphone. It's, to me, when I think of, because I scare people away by talking about cost, but I also like to say that you can do it on your phone. That's one of the great things about podcasting today, is that you can literally use your phone if you had to.
True enough.
Let's talk about you. What's your personal origin story?
Wow. Well, I've had a very interesting life, and I considered myself I was normal until I was around 28. Corporate America, San Francisco, married, working a corporate job, working nonstop. My wife and I were kind of passing each other. And, I was really going down the yuppie road that my father had taught me. And then my wife at the time, we're divorced now, but my wife said, hey, do you want to go to Burning Man? And I was like, and this is 1998, before Burning Man was as big as it is now, both in popularity and size. And I was like, I don't know. Burning Man is kind of for those people, those hippies and massage therapists. And I had seen a picture book with a bunch of people in mud. But I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I went there, and the strangest thing happened was that I got out of my car and the words "I am home" popped in my head. And this new side of me started to evolve that was unexpected. And it really taught me that there was a whole new side. So I started taking workshops. I started to explore my sexuality. I started to do things like the Landmark Forum. I really did some internal investigation and saw there was this whole side of me that I had never seen before. And then in 2004, with a good friend of mine, started a company called One Taste. And One Taste taught about relationship, intimacy, communication, and sexuality. Did that for 10 years, built it from a paper napkin sketch to an international 8-figure firm, and then left in 2014, totally burned out, ready for the next thing, landed in Venice Beach, California, and restarted my life. And now I'm a business coach, life coach, podcaster, and writing a book proposal for my first book.
So something I want to go back and touch on is something that I've heard of, but I've never really even explored. For listening to other podcasts, I've heard them talk about Burning Man. What exactly is Burning Man?
Well, Burning Man, I haven't been in 10 years, so my information is antiquated, but I assume it's pretty similar. So it is a festival in the desert. It started in San Francisco, I think 25 years ago, with a guy broke up with his girlfriend and could not get over it. So he had a celebration with his friends where he burnt a man in effigy to kind of deal with his sorrow. And it was so much fun. They went back the next year, and then eventually it turned from 3, 5, 10 people to, I think there's 70,000 people that congregate in the desert, in the Nevada desert, for 10 days to celebrate, to bring art, to party, to drink, to do drugs. And the peak is on Saturday night, where they burn this 100-foot man. I'm actually not sure of the size, but 100-foot man, they burn him, and it's just a big party in the desert.
That is sounds like at the same time one of the coolest and craziest things I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Hearing about it, it always seemed like it was kind of a big party thing, but I didn't know the deeper message behind it, but until now.
Well, for me, it was a spiritual awakening. I mean, I really credit getting out of this comfort zone, going into the desert, and it led to the first honest conversation I'd ever had in my entire life with my wife at the time around my desire, around my sexuality. It was a place where I could actually speak the truth. And that one conversation totally changed my life and changed the direction of it. And so it was a really great experience for me.
And so before you started doing all these speaking events and whatnot, what were you doing?
I was trained as a biomedical engineer from grad school. I went into the computer business in the mid-'90s, right when personal computers were starting. And then I was a computer consultant, going into downtown firms and building databases for them. And then, like I said, went to Burning Man and everything Etch-a-Sketched, and migrated from a computer geek into someone who became a men's teacher and a sexuality teacher and a relationship teacher and a life coach. So total Etch-a-Sketch from geek to teacher.
How long did that transition take? Like, was it something instant or a slow burn?
No, it took about 5 years, actually.
Okay.
My started when I was 29, and then I opened up my business when I was 34. So it was a 5-year, learning and researching and getting trained and having my own ass kicked about my own ego and my own viewpoints. So I had a 5-year experience of switching.
And when you started your company, what was the goal there? What were you doing with that?
The goal was to make an impact in terms of how people viewed their relationship and intimacy and sexuality. And it was really a way to bring into the forefront all the blocks people have really about relating to their desire. And so we had a mission to wake the world up in terms of, hey, this isn't working. This isn't working for men. This isn't working for women. And we have some skills we think that might help. And so that's what we did.
So what would be like the typical, would people come to you, you go to them, for like a speaking event, combination of both?
We started off with a center in San Francisco, and so people would come to our center in San Francisco. At the peak, before I left, the peak, we had 9 cities internationally, one in London. We were also building affiliates in different countries, but we had workshops all over the world teaching our technology of how to be a better lover, how to be a better partner, and how to be a better communicator.
And were the people that were coming to these workshops or seeking your help, were they people in troubled relationships, or just what made someone come to you guys? The
gambit. I mean, really was from people in great relationships who wanted to expand what they had, to single guys who were virgins in their 20s and 30s, to couples that were so far gone in terms of how to relate to each other. Every different kind. We were kind of shocked because we thought we'd have more of a kind of a narrow demographic, but we really attracted so many different people, which just showed to me that pretty much across the board, people have questions about their relationships and questions about their communication and sexuality. So it was amazing touching all these different people and different demographics. And
what would you say the difference is, between say what you guys are doing or did, and like a traditional therapy? Like what would draw someone to one or the other?
I have a great respect for therapists. I have a great therapist myself that gets my head clear. And therapy, from my understanding, and there's many different modalities of therapy, but it's really you're trying to fix a problem. We had the model of you're good and let's take it better. And so it was life coaching. It was encouragement. It was teaching people that they were doing it right. We were teaching a specific skill, specific sexual practice to help people. And so there's significant limitations in therapy. And some people were not suited for our work. We would send them to therapists. But really, we have a very different approach of practically teaching people how to communicate better and how to be better in bed.
So you had working relationships with therapists. Okay, well, here's an interesting thought. Did therapists have that same like relationship with you guys, where they would realize that the people came to them needed you guys versus therapy?
We had some. I wouldn't call it a very common thing. I think some therapists just didn't understand what we were doing, or maybe didn't even like what we were doing. So I would not call that a common thing. It happened a few times, but not often.
And then, so what made you decide to leave this behind?
I was basically burnt out after 10 years of building the company, 70 to 80-hour weeks, pretty much nonstop for 10 years. I mean, some vacations, but very few. The stress, I was overweight. My health was diminishing. I was traveling nonstop. I basically would teach in a city for a few days, hang around an extra day and work on the business, and then jump on a plane and go somewhere else. So really after 10 years, I was pretty cooked and ready for a new life and wanted to have more freedom and more time. So I sold my shares in the company and, like I said, moved to Venice Beach and started a whole new life.
And so what was your first mission when you moved out to Venice Beach?
Health, mental health, physical health, really just, taking care of my body. I think I was heading towards an ulcer. I had a pretty bad acid reflux. So I started doing a lot of yoga. I spent a lot of time walking and being on the beach and sleeping and going to the movies, all the things I didn't have a chance to do. I started to eat healthier. I lost a bunch of weight. I did CrossFit for a bit. So I was really just exploring what my life wanted to be. And then pretty soon after that, I started some business consulting, using my skills I had of building this international corporation to help small businesses expand. I helped them with their books. I helped them with their technology. And so that's where I started in 2014.
When you went to go just kind of better your own life, you mentioned a few different things you tried. Is there anything specific that you found worked better than the other things?
I loved CrossFit. I don't know if you know much about CrossFit, but I loved it, and it also was not great for my 45-year-old body. I was trying to keep up with the 20 and 25-year-olds, and I could have trouble walking stairs. It was amazing and not quite for me. I met my fiance in March of 2015, and she is a functional nutritionist, so she taught me about food. I got off gluten, I got off soy, I got off dairy, so that's really helped my health a lot and dropped a bunch of weight from that. So really just living a healthier lifestyle. And where I was working 70, 80-hour weeks for years, now I max out about 35 hours per week, which is really the best part. I don't feel the same level of stress. I have more enjoyment, I have more energy, and I feel more functional in the world.
It sounds like there's like a three-piece process here of physical, physical health, and then the nutritional health, and then just the work-life balance to kind of get yourself right. For me, and for I feel like that because I feel like I have a good work-life balance, but it's always like a kicker. Like, is it the food that I'm ingesting, or the lack of exercise, the type of exercise I'm doing? So what do you think was the bigger contributor to physically getting healthier? Was it the nutritional health that you were doing, or was it the actual physical exercise?
Definitely a combination. Pretty much all the research, and like I said, I'm engaged now to a brilliant woman who knows everything about food. The world we live in, unless you live in the country, but most of the people in cities live really toxic lifestyles. We are surrounded by Wi-Fi. We're surrounded by electromagnetic smog. We have bad water, we have bad food, we have bad air. And so we take in a lot of toxins. And so she has me on a supplement regimen. We turn off we don't actually even have Wi-Fi in the house. We came up with a whole new system. Like I said, getting rid of the gluten in the dairy was huge because then my whole system could run better. Gluten is really bad for your digestion. So I always think in terms of food as the foundation for health, and then find the exercise to add on top of that. If you exercise a lot but don't take care of your food, you won't get healthy. And if you take care of your food and exercise a little, you can. So I always recommend people start with their food and their supplements because like I said, we live in a toxic society.
Well, and I think the food balance that's breaking habits, which are it's always hard to do. Like I have a portion control issue. I know this, and when I'm in the right mindset, I can eat the right amount of food versus eating 10 tacos in a sitting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I can't imagine a world where I don't have Wi-Fi. Is it? What's the reason to not have Wi-Fi?
Well, these are just theories, but I believe it, and there's a lot of research. And really, this is the government and health doesn't want you to know this because Wi-Fi is pretty toxic. And I'm really nervous about the effect of phones. And like smoking, was provided by the government to our soldiers, and not really think and now look at it. And I think Wi-Fi is going to be the next smoking. And we don't have Wi-Fi in the house. We have a system where we can actually plug into walls and use electricity as our network, which worked great in our house. And we don't sleep. We turn everything off, and it's just much healthier. Now, how do you know? Like, I have to have faith and belief in my fiance and her viewpoints, but I am sleeping better now than I ever have before. And I think the Wi-Fi and the clean living is a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I don't know. I guess I don't. I don't really know about too much. I know the technical aspect of Wi-Fi, of setting it up and whatnot. But like, I don't. I can definitely get on board with like when I eat better and when I'm physically healthier. It is definitely a game changer when it comes to sleeping, which is now I'm of the mindset of I either need 4 hours of sleep or about 10 hours of sleep, because it feels like I'm just anything less or more or in between. I feel like I'm not 100%. What's because obviously a good night's rest is gonna kind of set the pacing for the day. What is, as someone that studies is engaged as someone that's of a healthy mindset, what's like ideal amount of sleep?
I really just sleep until I'm done, and that changes night to night. We go to sleep relatively early. We try to go to sleep between 10 and 11 p.m. We're on the Pacific Coast. I used to, before I met Morgan, I would stay up till 11:30, 12, 1, watching TV or reading or being out. And so going to sleep at 10 and 11. I also live in a much quieter place. Moved from Venice Beach to the Valley, and so it's infinitely quieter, which I think helps. And then I try to sleep 7 hours. I usually sleep 7 to 8 hours, depending on the night. And I just sleep until I wake up. So I rarely use my alarm to wake up. Sometimes you have a flight or something different. Of course, I use an alarm. But most of the time, it's really based on my body clock. And my body clock tends to wake me up after 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And so that feels good to me. And everyone's different. And, your sleep changes as you get older and as your body changes as well. So I would just try going to sleep a little bit earlier. And then set your alarm for, let's say, if you normally get like 6 or 7 hours of sleep, go to sleep an hour earlier and just see if you can sleep that 8 or 9 hours and see what happens.
I'm envious of the internal clock because if I didn't have an alarm set, I could easily sleep for 12.
Oh, really?
What's out? Yeah. I mean, I guess I also am lucky in the fact that my kids won't let that happen either.
Yeah.
So, but if without kids or without an alarm clock, I'm just, I could sleep the day away. I would probably wake up eventually. Like, I think my internal alarm clock is around 11 a.m., maybe noon. I mean, and I guess maybe now that I'm older, maybe it's not. I don't know, because it's been so long. It's been at least 5 years since I've had the opportunity to sleep that late. But yeah, I know a ton of people that have that internal sleep clock, and that seems like such a great thing to have, because I feel like I would be way more productive if I didn't rely on an alarm clock that I can easily hit snooze on.
Yep.
So now that you're living this healthy lifestyle and you're consulting, you're podcasting, and you said you're about 80 episodes deep into that.
Yep.
And did that lead into the book, or how did the book come about?
Well, let's see. I really didn't want to write a book when it came down to it, and then it just kept coming up for me, and it just kept, I kept seeing the same themes inside relationships when it came to men and women. And I spent 14 years building a business on relating, and so I have some really specific viewpoints of how to communicate, how to be in better relationship that work. And in my viewpoint, relating between men and women is bad and getting worse as time goes on. And so I just had some views, and so I started doing the podcast, and then I was using the podcast as content. And then I went to the Hay House Writers Conference in Las Vegas, where they offered a free contract. They had a contest for a free contract for one member of the audience. So that's due October 9th. So I've been working the last 5 months on writing a book proposal for Hay House, and it's been great because it's really brought a lot of discipline to my writing and a lot of discipline to the book. And so I'm really excited to see what happens when I submit it.
So with writing, is that something that you have done before or had a passion for, or is it just kind of came together for this Hay House project?
I've been a writer my entire life. I love words. I love imagery. So it's, writing this is relatively easy. I mean, the book proposal is harder because you have to think in terms of data, market analysis, and you have to think of competitive analysis. So the book proposal has challenges. But for me, writing has always been relatively easy. And I've written blogs, I've written stories, and so yeah, relatively straightforward.
And so where's the origin for that? That's another creative outlet, or another outlet that not many people do, really. So where's your origin with wanting to write?
When I was young, my dad brought home one of the first laptop computers. It was a Zenith, I think it was called, and it had a really basic Word. It was a DOS computer, and I'm 47, so this is in the 80s, mid 80s. And I just loved the process of it. And then I just had all, desire to write stories. And so as a kid, I just would write down like stories, like my dog I had to put to sleep. So I wrote a story about that. I was a football player and I had feelings about that. And then I wrote a book when I was 17 or 16 to 18 years old. It was called The Man of No Consequence. And it was kind of my high school experience, very sophomoric and very, basic. But it had a little twist at the end and got some tears out of people. And so I just really have always enjoyed the process of writing. And it's just been a way to communicate what's in the inside out.
And so when you're, in all the years you've been writing, do you have like a preferred genre, a preferred medium that you like to write in?
I moved away from fiction stories. I write stories for Medium. I've written stories for blogs. I've written stories about my life, autobiographical. That'll come out eventually someday because, like I said, I've led a very interesting life. So it's been pretty much nonfiction. And then the book proposal I'm writing is called Unhidden, a book for men and those confused by them. So it's really a book for men because there aren't that many great books out there for men. David Data, published in 1997, No More Mr. Nice Guy in 2003. Dr. Robert Augustus Masters wrote one a few years ago. That's really good to be a man. But there really aren't many great manuals out there for men how to be a healthy man in today's society. And so I felt called to write the book that I thought was missing in the world.
And so can you, go into a little bit more detail about what the book is about? Like, what do you mean it's like to be living a healthy male lifestyle?
Well, there's, in my opinion, in my experience of coaching and teaching, men are really having a rough challenge of the 21st century. And what's happening is a few things. One is the technological revolution, the smartphone, has had men be more isolated. There was a Boston Globe article that came out that men fear more isolation than they do cancer. Like they fear dying alone rather than getting sick, which was interesting. Also, the gender gap between men and women is really shifting, and women are pulling ahead in many things. One thing, the pay gap is shrinking. More women are being hired out of college than men, and men are more confused in the dating world. The Tinder revolution has really confused a lot of things. And there's a bunch of other things. Free porn that came out 2000, 2008 has heavily, negatively impacted the world, and I could go on that for a while, and really affected the men's sexuality, problems with erectile dysfunction. And so men are really facing a lot of challenges. So the book is a way to, called Unhidden. The concept is how to bring what's inside out, how to be fully authentically who you are, how to succeed living out in the world. Then there's a section on how to interact with a modern woman who's shifting really quickly, and a lot of men are confused by them. And then the last section is about how to find your purpose, how not to follow your father's path, how to really find who you truly want to be in the world. And so that's the last section of how to find out who you want to be.
It is interesting to kind of, I guess, have it spelled out to you about all the modern day technology and whatnot that really is kind of a distracting or has just changed society, for both genders and for everybody. But I would never put two and two together about free porn being a thing that hinders anybody. So
my goodness.
So explain that a little bit.
Well, first off, let me just recommend, highly, highly, highly recommend. There's an Audible book, audiobook called The Butterfly Effect. That's free on Audible, and I listened to it, and it just blew me away. It's beautifully done, and it's extremely scary because the concept is the butterfly effect. It's of course from chaos theory, from the the 1980s, 1990s, that a butterfly flaps its wings in Asia and that causes a storm in South America. So, that's called the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
And the concept of the book was that there was this one guy named Fabian who figured out how to make money off of free porn in 2000, 2008. And the effect of that was that people were just uploading free porn. One, it wiped out the whole porn industry. But second, it made it available, hugely available, to teenagers and preteens. And it's negatively affected the health. So one stat they brought up during this butterfly effect was erectile dysfunction from 16 to 21 used to be 2 to 3%. Now there's reports of 20 to 22% erectile dysfunction of men 16 to 21, and they can't totally match it, but it really arose at the same time as free porn. So the hypothesis is that porn has a negative impact on the brain. Guys are watching it, and they're losing touch with their biology. They're also losing touch with attractiveness to normal women. They're equating sex with what they view on porn, and so it's really messing up how young men are viewing sexuality compared to when I was growing up in the 70s. You found a Playboy magazine in your dad's garage, and you were happy, and so now it's totally different.
That's fascinating because I don't know why, but like the way I view like technology is like when I'm about 15 years younger than you. I'm 33, and for me, like I look at technology and kind of like look at my kids and whatnot, and it's like, well, when I was a kid, like if I got bullied, it was at least like to my face, and like that's how I don't. And maybe it's because I literally grew up with the internet. Like it was, I remember when AOL 2.5 was out, and I was like, I'm that generation that grew up with it, but I never, I guess I didn't suffer any of those consequences at all, because I've never even heard, I've never equated what, that free porn to disadvantage. But I do see, like, as a parent now, like I see, well, now that worries me, that I didn't even think about preteens or teens just having access to it. But more so, like, so like I was saying, getting bullied to your face versus cyberbullying is like a major, seems like a much bigger issue these days. And, the cyberbully can't see the effects that he's having.
Well, I mean, just look at the ubiquitous use of phones, and parents are the same way. We're always on our phones, and kids are seeing that. You go to restaurants, and what do parents do? They don't give a kid a book; they give a kid a phone. They give a kid a screen, and so people are really growing up with an addiction to their screens. I'm just as guilty as everyone else. I'm not trying to put myself above anyone, but it is the society we built in. There's a comfort level. You're sitting in a waiting room, you're bored, what do? You pull out your phone. You look for a hit. And there's biological effects of phones. You look at Facebook and see anyone liked your posts because it's a hit of dopamine. There's a lot of science behind the effect of electronics that didn't exist. And to go back to the earlier conversation, we don't really know the negative effect of cellular technology on our biology, and many people really suspect that having a phone next to your head is radiation, and cancer is going to come down the line. So there's a lot to really pay attention to and take care of, especially for the kids with underdeveloped bodies being surrounded by this electromagnetic smog. Yeah, I mean
the cell phone next to your head and the radiation thing is definitely like that. I've definitely heard of, and I feel like that was again, I kind of grew up with cell phones. Like I when I was a kid, that was like the first car phone, and then it became a tank of a cell phone, and then it became getting smaller and smaller and smaller until you had computers that were in the palm of your hand, and they got a little bit bigger again. But I feel like there could be some truth too, because it makes sense for sure. And like it is one of I say this being the kid that used to play a Game Boy in the back seat of a car, but like it's weird to me when kids 5 to 10 or even like up to 14 or 15 before they have a job, like when they have phones, because to me that's not necessary. Like, I didn't have a phone until I had a job, but I guess I also had a Game Boy. I don't know. It's a weird kind of like tightrope to walk with this generation that is literally, like you said, like it's their faces in a phone all the time. And me too. Like it's not like I try not to. I try to be way more aware that I'm doing it, and so I try to turn it off or throw it in my back pocket or something, so that I'm not tempted to just I'm sitting here doing nothing while the kids are playing. Let me pop my nose in my phone.
Right. I do this. I try to do the same thing. When the kids are around, when my fiance's around, the phone goes down. It's a new response, and I really am happy about it. And they go away and they run into the house and they come in later and I'm on my phone. I'm like, that's just a signal. And so it's just raising my awareness. It's talking about it. My 9-year-old stepdaughter wants a phone, and she's like, some kids in her school have phones at 9 years old. Yeah. So it's a changing world that we have to just pay attention to.
Yeah, and I've had friends of mine who have given their kids, whether they're like, I know my nephew, he just turned 10 and he's had a phone for a couple months now, and I don't understand why, but there's other friends that have 8 or 9 or 10, even 11-year-olds that have phones, and it's like, well, we're not the one that's always going to pick him up from soccer practice, so he needs to have a phone so that he knows who's picking him up, or so that if someone forgets him, it's and that, like, I was like, I can get behind the logic on that. And that's like tightrope. That's the weird tightrope of when we were kids, it just wasn't an option to have, so that's why we didn't have it. But now that it's an option, is it the right option? Is it? It's a weird tightrope that I guess our parents had their own tightropes to walk, but I feel like we have it harder.
True enough.
So as you finish up this book proposal, what else do you have on the horizon?
Well, I'm building up my consulting practice. I have two sides in my brain. I have a split personality, or as my branding person likes to say, two sides of a coin. So I have a very successful business consulting. I help people with their businesses. I have clients in Boulder and Washington and New York, and I do all that remotely. So that's a really great part. So building on my business consulting. Once the book is complete, the book proposal is done, I'll work on that. And then speaking career is really the next thing online. I really like to do a TED Talk down the line. I'd like to build a speaking career. But having a book before the speaking career, I've been told, is really beneficial. So I'm being patient with that. I've done talks at festivals and locations. I'm going to Seattle in October to do a talk with one of my clients. So it's really just building the business consulting, building my life coaching, increasing the podcast by doing guest stars like at places like this, learning new skills, and really enjoying a healthy work-life balance.
And I do, because we, not that this show is necessarily a podcast about podcasts, but it is, podcast is a big passion of mine and whatnot. Because we didn't really dive fully into what Tuff Love is. Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about that, since you are trying to put a focus on that? Sure.
Well, Tuff Love, it's kind of how I coach and teach. Tuff Love is the kind of truth you don't really want to hear, but you kind of do. It hurts when it goes in, but then it feels good because the truth is so raw. It's the part of yourself you can't see for yourself that your best friends or someone you trust tells you, like a college teacher, and it changes your life. And I think it's really missing. I think we live in a very polite society where people aren't telling each other the truth. So the concept of Tuff Love is the truth that needs to be said to set you free. The format of the call, it's every Thursday at 10 a.m. PST. I use a technology called Zoom, which is sort of like Skype on steroids. You can click on a link, and then you go to the show, and you can watch me live, and there's 10 to 20 other people watching. You can see their faces. I do a topic on something I'm interested in at the moment, from relationship to sexuality to communication to business. So I do a 20-minute rant on the topic. Then I invite someone on the line to do live coaching in the second half of the show, and so I coach them on that topic. So it's really fun. It's interactive. It's kind of fast. It's the fastest 40 minutes of my week, and it's a great time.
It's so you do your show live. You stream it live.
Yes.
That is, and that's something that was, all these years ago when podcasting first started, was not really a big option. Mm-hmm. But that's something that as soon as it really became an option and I got hip to it, like it influences how I do my podcast today. I don't live stream anymore. But I also live streaming. I think one of the great things about that is that because it's live, like whatever you say is out there already. So that instantly cuts your editing time down. You're now listening, and that's huge for me. Is as much as I love to tell people to go out there and host your own podcast, there are a couple caveats, and it is eventually it's going to turn into, if it's something that you end up loving and you're passionate about, it's going to turn into a pricey project, and it's also time consuming because it's anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, of you sitting down and recording an episode, and then you have to spend that same amount of time editing that episode. And so for some people, it takes them twice the amount of time to edit because they're really meticulous the way they edit. And I think that's, I think every podcaster should live stream because I think it changes your world.
Yeah.
Have you always live streamed it, or have you done a mix?
I always have. I am a teacher, and I've been teaching for 14 years at this point, so I'm good in front of an audience. I'm quick on my feet. I'm funny. I have the words come to me really quickly, so I love the action of the live podcast. For me to sit and record one just sounds horrible. It sounds torturous. So I'm on edge. And then what I do is I do my show on Thursday. I then take the audio and then do a little cleaning, add an introduction, add some music, but I don't do much editing unless I say something really bad, which happens from time to time.
Yep.
And then I publish it every Monday. So the podcast is polished a little bit, but really not a lot. I really like the raw aspect of the show.
Yeah, and that's something that, I think is what I've done since I've live streamed is I don't edit out content unless, like you said, it's something just way over the top that me or a guest has said. But it's giving that final polish so that when the people who are seeking it out on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you're listening to podcasts these days, they get something that just is crisp.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Robert, before we let you go, why don't you tell people where they can find you, where they can find your podcast, and everything else that you have going on?
The best way to find me is tufflove.live, TUFF love.live. That's where you can find all information about me, my coaching, my teaching schedule, how to help me with the book. So yeah, just go to tufflove.live. There's a link there to my iTunes. It's also there, and you can actually listen to the shows either via my website or via iTunes.
And speaking of, you remind me of live. Have you done, or are you considering doing like a more like an actual live show where you go to like a venue of some sort and do the show like on a stage or something?
Oh yeah, yes. I mean, I love teaching live. If anyone's out there looking for a good speaker, I've been doing this for 14 years. I'm pretty good. So I'll travel anywhere, that works to do a live show. So I can do speeches, I can do talks, I can do workshops, and also I'd love to do my podcast out in the world. It'd be super fun.
Yeah, I'd say that's something that for the first 8 to 9 years of my podcasting career, I only had the opportunity to do once, and then starting this show up, we've been able to do it 6 to 10 times, and
nice.
It's such a fun experience. Because it's even more different than doing it streaming live, because it's you actually are in the same room and you feel that vibe of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's I've been lucky enough to have this type of podcast where it's just me and one person, or me and a couple people talking, live streaming and live audience, and they each are cool in their own unique way. But there's something real special about doing it live on a stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, if you have the opportunity, or if anyone out there wants to bring Tuff Love to your podcasting or comedy venue, hit them up at tufflove.live, because I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I know Robert won't be disappointed. It's a good time.
Thank you so much.
Robert, thank you for doing the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. As a reminder, go and check out tufflove.live for more information about Robert and what he's up to with his podcasting, his speaking events, and everything he just described here today. You can find Everything Is Awesome, like I said, on Facebook and Twitter at Real Awesome Pod. You can also find us on Instagram at Awesome Podcast. You can find us on awesomepodcast.com. We are part of the Court Temp Arts Podcast Network. On courttemparts.com. I keep forgetting to say this, but leave a 5-star review on iTunes. That's always appreciated. Until next time, I'm Kev, and this is Everything is Awesome. We've been awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.